There is a kind of man the world cannot easily move, not because he is loud, not because he is aggressive, not because he performs strength for an audience, but because he sees clearly. He understands how power actually works, how people actually behave, how the world actually operates beneath the polished surface of what everyone pretends is true. That man is dangerous in the best possible sense of the word. Dangerous to manipulation, dangerous to deception, dangerous to the comfortable lies that keep most men small and predictable and easy to steer. Niccolò Machiavelli spent his life studying that kind of clarity. He watched governments rise and fall. He observed men of genius destroyed by naivety, and men of average talent dominate through sheer strategic intelligence. And what he wrote down was not a guide to cruelty, as his critics preferred to believe, but something far more honest and far more useful. A mirror, a cold, unflinching mirror, held up to the real nature of human affairs, stripped of wishful thinking, stripped of romantic illusion, stripped of the comfortable myths men tell themselves to avoid doing the hard work of understanding the world they actually live in. This is not a video about becoming ruthless. It is not a celebration of cynicism. The Stoics, whom this channel is built on, would have had deep disagreements with Machiavelli on certain things, and we will name those honestly along the way. But they would have agreed on one thing without hesitation: a man who does not see reality clearly cannot navigate it wisely, and a man who cannot navigate it wisely will forever be subject to the designs of those who can. The 10 lessons in this video are about developing that clarity, that strategic depth, that unshakable mental composure that makes you not just hard to manipulate, but genuinely formidable in every room you walk into. If that is the man you are building toward, you are in the right place. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing, because this kind of thinking is exactly what this channel exists to develop. 1. Most people are navigating power, while pretending they aren't. Machiavelli's most uncomfortable contribution to human thought was not a strategy or a tactic. It was an observation. He looked at the world of human affairs and said, plainly, that power is the operating currency of every human relationship, every institution, every interaction, whether people acknowledge it or not. And the men who pretend otherwise are not more virtuous than those who acknowledge it. They are simply less prepared for what is actually happening around them. This is not a cynical statement, it is a clarifying one. Because once you accept that power dynamics exist in every room you enter, in every organization you're part of, in every relationship you maintain, you stop being surprised by the moves people make. You stop being blindsided by the colleague who positions himself strategically, by the friend who shifts alliances when circumstances change, by the institution that rewards visibility over merit. You see the game. And seeing the game is the first and most essential requirement for playing it well, or choosing deliberately not to play it, which is its own kind of power. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire reign studying the men around him, watching their motivations, understanding their drives, not out of suspicion but out of strategic clarity. He wrote in his journals about the importance of seeing people as they actually are, not worse than they are, but accurately. The man who mistakes flattery for loyalty, who confuses silence for agreement, who reads cooperation as commitment, is the man who gets outmaneuvered not by superior intelligence, but by simple ignorance of what was always true. Open your eyes. Not to become paranoid, but to become perceptive. The world is operating with or without your understanding of it. The only question is whether you're navigating consciously or being navigated by those who are. 2. Your image is a strategic asset. Manage it deliberately. Machiavelli understood something about human psychology that most men resist accepting even now. People respond to what they perceive far more than to what is actually true. This is not a flaw in human nature to be lamented. It is a feature of reality to be understood. And the man who ignores this does not thereby escape it. He simply allows other people to manage his image for him, which is one of the most dangerous things a strategically serious person can do. Managing your image does not mean performance. It does not mean pretending to be something you are not. At its most honest level, it means being intentional about how you show up, what you say and what you choose not to say, how you carry yourself when things are difficult, what you allow people to witness of your process, and what you keep private until the work is done. There is a reason the Stoics taught extensively about composure in public, not vanity, not theater, but the understanding that the man who loses his composure in every frustration, who complains openly, who makes his anxiety visible to everyone around him, trains the people in his life to see him as unstable. And unstable men are not trusted with serious things. The image you project should be a disciplined expression of what you are actually building internally. When those two things align, when the outside reflects genuine internal work, that is not manipulation. That is integrity in the truest sense of the word, integrated, whole, consistent. The dangerous part of this lesson is not learning to manage your image. It is neglecting to, while assuming that the quality of your character will be obvious without any thought given to how it's expressed. Quality is often invisible until it's made visible. You have more control over that visibility than you think. 3. Never reveal the full architecture of your mind. There is a difference between honesty and total transparency, and Machiavelli spent considerable pages helping his readers understand it. Honesty is a virtue. It means you do not deceive people about what is true. Total transparency, however, is not a virtue. It is often a vulnerability, and in certain environments, it is an invitation for exploitation. The man who announces every plan before it is complete, who shares every ambition before it is secured, who reveals every insecurity in his unfiltered moments, is handing over a map of exactly how to derail him. This is not about becoming closed or cold or unknowable to the people who matter. The lesson is more precise than that. It is about learning to distinguish between the people who deserve your full interior life and the environments where restraint is the wiser practice. Keep your plans private until they are further along. Let your results speak first and your methods second. Do not audition your vision for approval from people who haven't earned the right to evaluate it. There is something the Stoics called the inner citadel, the part of your mind that no external force can touch without your permission. Machiavelli would add, protect not just your peace, but your strategy. Not every thought needs an audience. Not every ambition needs a witness before it is real. Epictetus said that we should be silent for the most part, or if we speak, on only what is necessary. He was talking about emotional restraint, but the principle extends. Words have weight. Revelations have consequences. The man who has mastered the art of strategic silence, who speaks with precision and withholds with intention, carries himself differently. People sense the depth without being able to measure it, and that unknown depth is itself a form of presence. You become harder to read, harder to predict, harder to position against. That is not deception. That is discipline applied to communication, and it is one of the most underrated skills a serious man can develop. 4. Study men as they are, not as they should be. This is perhaps Machiavelli's most enduring and most misunderstood contribution. He wrote that many have imagined republics and principalities that have never been seen to exist in truth, and that the man who abandons what is done for what should be done learns his ruin rather than his preservation. He was not arguing for moral relativism. He was arguing against willful blindness, against the habit of evaluating people by the ideal version of themselves, rather than the actual version they have demonstrated through behavior over time. This distinction matters enormously in practical life. The man who judges others by their stated intentions rather than their consistent actions will be disappointed, used, and outmaneuvered repeatedly. Not because people are fundamentally malicious, but because people are human. They are motivated by self-interest, fear, desire for status, need for security. These are not dark forces, they are simply the real forces, and when you understand them clearly, you can work with reality instead of against it. You stop taking things personally when people act in their own interest. You stop being surprised when relationships shift, when circumstances shift. You start choosing your alliances based on aligned values and demonstrated character rather than on words alone. Carl Jung said that the most dangerous thing of all is to take things at face value. He was speaking about the unconscious, about the gap between what people consciously present and what is actually driving them. Machiavelli said essentially the same thing about political and social life. Study behavior, study patterns, study what people do when the cost of integrity is high, because that is when character reveals itself most honestly. This is not paranoia, it is wisdom. And the man who has cultivated this kind of clear-eyed human understanding moves through the world with a navigational advantage that most people, operating on hope and assumption, simply do not have. 5. Be the lion and the fox, strength and intelligence. Together, Machiavelli wrote that a prince must know how to make use of both the lion and the fox. The lion is pure force, direct strength, the ability to hold a position and not be moved. The fox is cunning, intelligence, the ability to see traps that the lion would walk into without question. Most men are wired toward one or the other. The man who is all lion charges forward on instinct, raw and direct and often effective, until he meets the trap he didn't see coming. The man who is all fox is shrewd but hesitant, always calculating, always seeing the angles but struggling to act decisively when action is required. The mentally dangerous man has integrated both. He knows when directness is the most powerful move and when subtlety is. He knows when to apply pressure and when to retreat and observe. He knows when to show his strength and when to reveal only enough to accomplish his purpose and no more. This is not inconsistency, it is flexibility, which the Stoics also valued deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the ability to adapt without losing the core, to be different things in different contexts, while remaining the same person at the center. That adaptability is not weakness. Rigidity is weakness. The branch that bends survives the storm. The branch that refuses to flex breaks. To think about the environments you move through and ask yourself honestly, do you have range? Can you be forceful when the moment requires force? Can you be patient when patience is the more powerful strategy? Can you read which kind of situation you're in and respond accordingly, or do you apply the same approach to every circumstance and wonder why it doesn't always work? Range is built through self-awareness, through studying your own defaults, through deliberately practicing the mode that doesn't come naturally to you. The lion who learns to think like the fox becomes something the world genuinely cannot easily handle. 6. Fortune favors the prepared, not just the bold. Machiavelli spoke of fortune, what we would call chance, circumstance, be the unpredictable movement of events, as a river that floods when left unchecked, but can be managed when men have built the dikes and channels in advance. He observed that men who relied primarily on fortune for their success were undone the moment fortune shifted, while men who had built genuine capability, genuine structure, genuine internal resources, endured and eventually recovered from every setback that circumstance threw at them. This maps directly onto the Stoic principle of preparation. Not preparation as anxiety, not the endless planning that never converts to action, but the deliberate building of capability before you need it. Seneca wrote that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and the key word there is preparation, the part that comes before the opportunity arrives, in the quiet seasons. In the unexciting periods when no one is watching and there is no immediate reward for the work you're doing. The man who builds his skills, his financial foundation, his physical health, his network of genuine relationships, his emotional resilience in the calm periods, is the man who faces adversity without being destroyed by it, because the structure was built before the storm came. Most men wait. They wait for the right moment to get serious. They wait for external pressure to force development. They wait until the crisis is already upon them and then wonder why they feel so underprepared for it. Machiavelli was clear about this. The time to build the dikes is not when the river is rising. The time to build is now, in the ordinary days that most men waste on comfort and distraction. Every day you spend building something real. Every uncomfortable thing you choose to master before you absolutely need to, every position you establish before the moment of decision arrives, is a vote against fortune and a vote for design. That's the shift. From hoping circumstances cooperate to ensuring that you are capable, regardless of whether they do. 7. The art of timing. When to move and when to be still. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the critical importance of timing, about the difference between the man who acts too early before conditions have aligned and the man who waits too long until the window has closed and someone else has moved into the space. Both errors carry real cost, and the ability to read timing, to feel the right moment for the right action, is one of the most sophisticated and least taught skills in any serious man's development. This is different from hesitation. Hesitation is fear wearing the costume of strategy. True timing is patient observation that converts to decisive action at the precise moment when action will be most effective. The Stoics spoke of this as well, though in different language. The concept of acting in accordance with the moment, of bringing your full capacity to bear at the right time rather than scattering it across every moment indiscriminately. There is a difference between the man who reacts immediately to every situation and the man who observes long enough to understand what a situation actually requires, and then moves with full commitment when the time is right. In practical terms, this means learning to tolerate the discomfort of waiting when waiting is the right strategy. Not every conflict demands an immediate response. Not every opportunity must be seized in the first moment it appears. Not every question requires your answer before you've fully thought it through. The man who can sit with an unresolved situation, who can observe without yet acting, who can hold his response while continuing to gather information, operates from a place of genuine power. Others feel the pressure to fill the silence, to resolve the tension, to make the move before they're ready. You wait, you watch, you choose your moment, and when you finally act, you act with clarity and completeness, not the scattered urgency of a man who couldn't tolerate the wait. 8. Keep your own counsel, the strategic value of silence. Machiavelli warned his readers that one of the most common and most costly mistakes of powerful men was their relationship to advisors and counsel. Not that seeking advice was wrong, but that the man who does not think for himself, who outsources his conclusions to the loudest or most persuasive voice in the room, inevitably becomes an instrument of someone else's agenda rather than the author of his own. The deeper lesson here is about developing the capacity to sit with your own thinking long enough to know what you actually believe before the noise of other people's opinions drowns it out. Most men don't know what they think about their most important decisions until they've told someone else and watched the response. They shape their views in real time based on external reaction rather than internal examination. That is a form of intellectual dependency, and it is more common and more limiting than most men would be comfortable admitting. This is not about refusing wise input. The Stoics deeply valued counsel from the right people. Seneca wrote entire letters about the power of a genuine philosophical friendship, one where two serious men sharpen each other honestly. But there is a crucial distinction between seeking counsel and surrendering judgment. You can listen to 10 people's perspectives and still return to silence, sit with all of it, and emerge with your own conclusion. You can receive input without being moved by social pressure. You can hold your position when challenged, not out of stubbornness but out of a clarity that doesn't dissolve simply because someone disagrees. That self-directed thinking, developed through regular solitude and honest internal examination, is not arrogance. It is the beginning of genuine authority. The man who knows his own mind cannot easily be talked out of it. 9. Respect is built. It cannot be borrowed or begged. One of Machiavelli's most discussed and most misunderstood observations was his comparison of love and fear as bases for authority. He noted that while love is preferable in theory, a man who depends on others' love for his position is vulnerable because love can be withdrawn the moment circumstances change. He argued for building something more reliable, a reputation for consistency, for following through, for being a man whose word and whose character hold regardless of whether the situation is comfortable. Translated out of political theory and into the life of a serious man, this becomes something important and often neglected. Respect is not given. It is earned through demonstrated consistency over time, and once it is lost through inconsistency or weakness of character, it is extraordinarily difficult to recover. The man who chases approval, who adjusts his positions to please whoever he is speaking to, who is one thing in one room and something different in another, trains the people around him to see him as unreliable, as performance rather than substance. And performance, no matter how polished, never creates genuine respect, because people sense the gap between the face and what's underneath it. The Stoic version of this is simpler and even more demanding. Be the same man everywhere. Hold the same values whether you are observed or unobserved. Follow through on what you say, whether or not there is anyone keeping score, because the person who is always keeping score is you. And the respect that ultimately matters most, the kind that becomes the foundation of genuine self-confidence, is the respect you build for yourself through years of keeping your word to yourself. External respect follows naturally from internal integrity. It cannot be manufactured in the absence of it. 10. The examined man cannot be manipulated. Every tactic that has ever been used to manipulate a man depends on one thing, that he does not see it coming. And he does not see it coming because he does not see himself clearly. He doesn't know his own fears well enough to recognize when someone is using them to steer him. He doesn't know his own vanities well enough to notice when flattery is being used as a lever. He doesn't know his own hunger for approval well enough to see when someone is dangling it to extract compliance. Self-ignorance is the most exploitable vulnerability a man can carry. And most men carry it their entire lives without ever quite naming it. This is where Machiavelli and the Stoics converge most powerfully, and it is the most important lesson in this entire video. Machiavelli taught the mechanics of power. The Stoics taught the examined life. Together they point to the same truth. The man who has genuinely turned his attention inward, who has sat honestly with his own patterns, his own fears, his own blind spots, his own desires, is a man who is extraordinarily difficult to manipulate, because manipulation works by activating something in you that you haven't yet brought into the light. The moment you shine light on it, you see it being activated, and seeing it being activated, you can choose not to respond. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's not fate. That's unexplored interior territory being operated by whoever knows where to press. And the work of the examined life, the daily practice of honest self-reflection, of sitting with your discomforts and naming them, of understanding what drives you toward certain people and patterns and choices, is the work that removes those levers from anyone else's hands and places them in yours. This is the deepest form of mental danger, not aggression, not cunning, but clarity. The man who knows himself completely is the man who cannot be easily played, because the plays that work on everyone else require a gap between the man's self-image and his actual self. When that gap closes, the manipulation has nowhere to land. Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living. He also implied something more pointed. The unexamined man is not the author of his own life. He is a character in someone else's story, moved by forces he doesn't understand, serving purposes he never consciously chose. The examined man is something categorically different. He moves through the world with a quality of awareness that most people around him do not possess. And that awareness is the foundation of everything this video has been building toward.